Christianity has a bad reputation, and rightly so. Yet, Christian values are so deeply entrenched in and ingrained in Western culture that we cannot avoid the ideals, the principles, the morality of American Christian heritage. In this video, I want to critically examine Christianity. In order to do that, though, first we must examine culture. Culture is manufactured. Culture is simply a set of agreed on ideas and beliefs that are shared among a group of people. Those beliefs are not dependent on fact. Fundamentalist Christians have their share of beliefs and myths, and I'd like to examine a few of those here. One of their beliefs is the inerrancy of the Bible. The Bible is a perfect and divinely inspired document of God's will for humanity. All of the stories of miracles are real. To accept Jesus, we must believe Jesus was born of a virgin, died on the cross, and was bodily resurrected 3 days later. The earth will be destroyed on Judgment Day when Jesus returns. The saved will go to heaven. The damned will go to hell. These are very powerful beliefs because they are part of the culture of fundamentalist and evangelical Christians. These beliefs are deeply ingrained in a mythology that has power over those who believe. That power is fear-based, yet it is also hope-filled. Christianity gives many people hope. So with that in mind, I want to critically examine those fears and hopes of Christian beliefs and to put into perspective those fears and why hope is a necessary part of what the future holds for all of us. We should consider, too, that humans have been searching for truth since the beginning of humans, and that search has been taught through oral traditions and some of it has been written. The Jewish and Christian Bible, though, is an important part of that search because it has stood the test of time, meaning that people still read it and look to it for answers. However, like any book, the Bible is subject to interpretation. The New Testament was written during the Roman occupation of the Western Mediterranean society known as Israel. Jesus was a Jewish carpenter who lived in Nazareth, a small town in Galilee. Those two facts speak volumes about how to interpret Jesus' teachings and actions as recorded by the authors of the New Testament. In other words, he was one of the oppressed. Jesus was part of a tradition of Old Testament prophets who challenged imperialism, or more specifically, the rule of human kings. God was the only ruler that one should serve, according to the Old Testament prophets, because human kings were corrupted by wealth and power. Indeed, the Old Testament documents the history of invading kings and corrupt leaders of Israel. Jesus summarizes the teachings of prophets by saying, "Love the Lord thy God with all your heart and soul and being, and love your neighbor as yourself." The Roman leaders and army stood in opposition to Jesus' message. The consensus of most scholars is that Mark is the oldest text in the New Testament, written in about 60 to 70 AD. Mark was used by Matthew and Luke to write their expanded versions of the Jesus narrative. These texts were all written 35 to 60 years after Jesus was crucified. These texts are significant because they all try to make sense of Jesus' life and, more importantly, his death. Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John are all part of the Jesus revolution against Roman rule. By resurrecting Jesus, the authors of the gospel further challenge Roman rule by saying Jesus could not have been killed by Roman authorities, that his body or message is still alive and well, living through us. To see Jesus' resurrection as literal does not demean the value of the story. It only increases its strength to survive as it has for over 2,000 years. But we must look at the meaning of Jesus' resurrection in context with the historical times. Jesus started a nonviolent movement for God's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. In other words, God's kingdom is here and now, not in some future afterlife. God's kingdom begins with love, compassion, justice, and hope in each of us. Jesus' notion of God's kingdom was a utopian vision for a better world, a world where people love each other as themselves, shared the resources of the world, and God's justice prevailed. And Jesus' justice was not limited to the Roman imperial authority. Jesus also challenged the religious authorities of the time, the Pharisees and the scribes, because they were corrupted by Roman political rule. Indeed, besides the Roman taxation system, poor peasants were subject to church taxation. The Pharisees lived opulent lifestyles, contrary to what Jesus believed was God's plan for the world. That is why Jesus challenged the Pharisees by mocking their authority. The authors of the gospel captured that message as good authors should. The mythological elements of the gospels are both a tribute to Jesus and an anti-imperialist challenge to Roman authority. Seen as such, the Gospels contain truths that are still relevant today. However, according to rational thinking people, truth is contained only in fact, and the fact of the Bible is that it is not to be taken literally. The Bible is subjective history and parable. To fail to understand the power of parables, though, is to miss the truths that are contained in the Bible. Anyone who has ever read and understood books like Moby Dick, The Scarlet Letter, and many other allegorical novels would understand what I'm saying. First, you should have paid attention during lit classes. Second, if you did pay attention, you would be privy to the secrets of creative writing like figurative language, symbols, metaphor, simile, allegory. What is that message? Why is it so important that we need to preserve it throughout the ages? Love. Love your neighbor as yourself. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Love God with all your heart and soul and being. God is truth. God is love for humanity. God is the sacred. Jesus' vision was a utopian vision, a vision of God's kingdom on earth, and is simply a vision for a better world, an anti-materialism message, which is anti-imperialism and anti-empire. Why is it so hard for Westerners to see that anti-imperialist message in the Bible? Because we live in the empire. We are part of the problem. The rich and powerful rule the world, and if by chance we kick them out of the U.S., they'll just go somewhere else. That is, unless we stop them. And the only way to stop them is to refuse to play by their rules. Jesus teaches us to use love, compassion, a passionate sense of justice, and nonviolence to combat the real evil of the world, which is materialism. This is Peace Elf saying, peace is only mind away. That tree bend? Does it inspire?